Great, we're officially at 7:30. We can begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. One agenda item this evening, and that is to discuss a discussion of possible action regarding the 2013-2014 Board of Education budget. Dr. Conway has provided us with some recommendations from the administration based on some of our previous cuts. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Conway in a moment just to go through what the administration recommendation is, and and then we can take action. One thing that I would recommend that we do this evening when we do take action is that we make our motions pending the passage of the referendum rather than just put it in so that if something does change, then we have to come back and reverse everything again. So just something I wanted to put out there. And at this time, we'll turn it over to Dr. Conway to explain the recommendations before us.
Thank you, Mr. Hull. As you can see, the sheet that's before you is similar to the list of cuts that you received earlier today. They are not done by date. It was, we thought, important to do it by location, that it would make more sense to us in terms of that. And so I'll go through the list, the items as they come on this list. The first one was a grade 3 to 4 teacher. You know that was cut from the Center Road school budget, and in our deliberations this afternoon, that certainly was something that Mrs. Poglich definitely fought for. She felt it was needed for that particular population of students. The students right now are in classes of 18. They would move to classes of 22.5, so 22 or 23. However, the discussion that the board had said early in the fall that you wanted to ensure that teachers had that collaborative planning time. And this is something the elementary people have been working on all year. They came forward with a proposal, and that proposal includes adding 1.6 art teachers to the district's roster. 0.2 of that 1.6 is for all-day kindergarten. So it's really adding 1.4 to the 0.2 request. And we know that we can get the 0.2 out of the Alliance District funding. Collaborative learning is also something that is very, very important, collaborative work for teachers, and we can do that in the Alliance District. But Mrs. Poglich was very clear that it was more important to make sure teachers across the district had collaborative planning time every single day by grade level than it was to have the grade 3 to 4 teacher. Mr. Gussie, and I won't be speaking this long on all the items, but Mr. Gussie also indicated he had been in that conversation as the Reading Language Arts Coordinator, and said that we have seen so much the power of the collaborative work that teachers are doing that far outweighs the number of kids that would be in the classroom. So that is the first thing to add back in, would be actually an art teacher. It would be district-wide, but that's where the funding came from, is the grade 3 to 4 teacher. If you move down to Rockville High School, the alternative learning program teacher, again, to address the needs of students individually, whether it's credit recovery or small tutoring work, to ensure that these students are able to graduate from school. The next 3 positions are secretary positions. You know, they were last out at your last go-around of cuts. And so, of course, there's been a lot of angst in the district over those cuts, but also people who are very concerned about getting the work done. And so those 3 additions were made. In all-day kindergarten, and this is a philosophical discussion the board will need to have, it's my request that you would put Maple Street and Northeast in the local budget, and the rest of the funding for all-day kindergarten in the Alliance District. I have checked with the Alliance people and with the state, with our technical advisor, and that certainly is something that is allowed for Alliance District funding. So you can choose to have the entire thing funded by Alliance District. My fear is relying 100% on a grant You know what happens when it falls off the cliff in 3 years. So my plan would be, if the board chooses this approach, would be to fund Maple Street and Northeast, that's 2.5 teachers in local budget, and the other 3 schools, which is 3.5 teachers in the Alliance District grant for this year, for the 13-14 year, and for 14-15 to fund the teachers from Center Road, that's 2 teachers, it's actually 4.5 teachers altogether for the other. Center Road the 2nd year, and then the 3rd year, so 3 years down the road, 16, 17, I think that would be, 15, 16, thank you, that we would add Lake Street and Skinner Road, and that's tiered by school, by achievement, and in that way, the board would know, if that's their plan, that after 4 years, all-day kindergarten would actually be funded locally. So it's a stepwise approach. But be assured that anything that is not funded locally would be funded through the Alliance grant right now, pending the budget approval and all of that. We will be funded for the Alliance grant for the full 5 years, so we have 4 years to go on that. So I do anticipate that that will not be a problem. But again, you could put the entire thing in Alliance grant, which is where it is right now, but that will have to be your decision in terms of what you believe should happen going forward. The special education tuition non-public, that is one of the 5 risk accounts that we are asking the board to not take a risk on again. You know that we took a lot of risk this year, and we're paying for it, and these 5 risk accounts were certainly accounts that we were very concerned about, but felt based on a picture in time that we could do. So we would ask that the board put that tuition back into the special education account. Central supply, that is paper and things like that, and that certainly is something that we need district-wide. The maintainer and the painter and the paint supplies is something that administration asked for, as well as our maintenance supervisor asked for. Additionally, the textbook adoptions, that's the entire grouping of textbook adoptions. Certainly we know that that was a very difficult decision for the board to make, to give those up. You also know that will push us back. We have a 5-year curriculum revision cycle, and if we're now buying science and math textbooks in another year, certainly we could do that, but that will push back whatever we were buying that year, whatever was in the revision cycle. So textbook adoptions would be wonderful. And then the rest of the 4 risk accounts. Health insurance, certainly we can, we've got some music background.
I'm so sorry.
The health insurance, we are aggressively meeting with different union groups to see if they'll move, and open enrollment was extended, correct, Mr. Picard? Open enrollment was extended, so we haven't realized what savings there might be there, but that is certainly a risk we're taking, that's a bet. In addition, the contingency account is a risk. And then, of course, the very high-risk ones were the alternative learning school and the projected vacancy rate. And so those 5 risk accounts, those 4 plus the one on the previous page, the tuition, would be ones that we would recommend. So you have the entire list of cuts. I did, as you can see, the only one that is a split one is the all-day kindergarten. And so together that adds up to the cut that the board made to put into the Alliance District. And so the amount in the left column was obviously reduced by the $189,922. I don't know why it's 56 cents, but maybe this. Okay. And I know there are administrators here who were in this discussion this afternoon that would be happy to answer questions as well. Mr. Carl was there, as well as Mrs. Rabani. So I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Holt.
Board members, you've heard some explanation. Does anybody wish to open up some dialogue or make any motions at this time? Ms. Goldich.
I have a question about the risk accounts, the alternative learning school and projected vacancy rate. When we removed that, I made a note that was salary savings. So why do we need to, if it's salary savings, why does it need to be added back in?
Right, those are actually, as you can see, named risk accounts. So those would be salary savings based on vacancies that we have not yet hired for. So someone leaves in November and we don't replace the person till the second week in December, and there is a savings. So those are risks. That could very well happen, and generally over the course of a year, it might happen. We're not in a hiring freeze starting July 1st, so we don't know that that's going to happen. It's a risk. It's a bet that we would take. So based on our experience this year in the budget, as little risk as possible would be my course of action. So if we could put that back in, that would be my preference. So yes, it is salary savings based on the hiring gap.
Vacancy, current vacancies.
And no. This would
Projected
be
vacancies.
projected, right.
During the year,
During the year, someone
Anticipated.
leaves. Yes, someone leaves.
And the contingency account, the health insurance and the contingency account.
The health insurance was based on moving people. We were in open enrollment in May, and we then extended it, hoping we would get more people to move to the health savings account. That is a savings. We are in negotiations with several groups right now, and one of the larger groups had not really had that conversation with us, the secretaries and custodians. We have had that conversation with some of the smaller groups, which would not be a huge impact. So it's still, it's a risk. It's a risk. And we said that to begin with. We cross our fingers. We believe we can do that aggressively, and we would still hope to do that aggressively. But it is a risk.
So there is the potential for savings in those two
Absolutely.
accounts.
Absolutely.
And the all-day kindergarten, putting, is that what, a third of the anticipated $475,000 cost for all-day K?
There are 7 positions, so this would be 2.5 positions. The following year, I would be looking at 2 positions, and then the following year at 2.5 positions.
So there's no backing off of the plan to have all-day
Correct.
K in every school in September?
That is absolutely correct.
We're just hardwiring part of the budget each year for the next...
Exactly, so
the
that,
next
so
three
that it
fiscal years.
sticks. Right.
Thank you.
Other discussion? Ms. Sarn, please use your mic.
We were willing to take risks in the contingency account and the health insurance account, and the 2 accounts that we named as risk accounts, I'm not sure I understand why those would be returned to the budget before we would return some of the other items like personnel, when we agreed with the business manager and the superintendent that although they were risks, that we could go ahead and do them. So I suppose I could see my way to reducing that risk amount, but putting it all back in, I'm having a hard time balancing that with some of the personnel that we didn't restore because administration chose those risks, to remove those risks from the budget. Can someone help me feel a little better about why all of that money should be back into our budget?
It's definitely based on where we're standing right now in our current year budget. I can tell you that's one thing. Mr. Picaro, I don't know if you want to shed any more light on it, but we're having to go to town council to get money to cover this year's budget because of those same types of risks that we've taken last year.
Did we take this kind of a risk?
Yes. Last year,
That kind
that's...
of dollar amount?
I was going to say, I know special ed was one of those that we definitely reduced last year. And we even bumped the magnet school tuition, and we didn't see that train coming.
Right.
Any other?
That's correct.
Mr. Percy?
Can I just have you clarify, we went to the town council to ask for some of our money that they have, not money from the town or...
It's money that wasn't in the budget this
Agreed, but
past
it's-
year, but it's money that is held in an account that is supposed to be earmarked for the Board of Education
Thank you.
that we're going to have to fight to get. Mr. Kemp?
Would you clarify what you mean by we have to fight to get?
We have to go before council to get them to reallocate the monies for this year's budget, which is it's a different discussion. This is, the next year's budget. I don't want to be in the same position next year having the same conversation, where we have to make motions to go to town council to ask them to appropriate money for us, whether it's out of a source that we should have access to or not. I don't want to be in that position. And I know I will be here next year. Got 2 more years.
You know that.
I know that.
Okay, am I gonna be here?
We'll see. I don't have the magic ball. Mr. Kevin.
I don't disagree with Mary's proposal about the 189. I would just like to have some idea of what we may have placed back in had we not opted, or should we not opt for that alternative. As an example, I don't remember what happened to the security guard. It just got lost in my brain here. Is the security guard still in the budget or not? I forgot.
High school, the extra security guard.
I don't think we're gonna.
We decided, we did not take action on that security.
So the security guard is still in the budget.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was where we took some of those risk accounts and we said we'd rather aim at the risk accounts a little bit before going after the personnel.
Okay.
Question, Mr. Work, go back in, I don't know if you left questions.
Well, I don't know how open-ended a question that really is. That's, in a sense, that's not fair, because everything could be put back in other than that. But I guess I'm just missing maybe a few substantial items that some board members might have liked to have seen go back in at this point. I can throw a few out there, but it's okay.
You have the floor. I would say, let's get the discussion going and then we can take whatever action we wanted to take. As I thought that the best place to start would be, with a recommendation from administration, and then we'd work off of that. So if you have items that you're thinking that you don't see here, I'd like to, have you throw them out and talk about them.
Well, there might have been a personnel item or two necessarily in place of a few of the choices here that have been listed as items to be included. I'm not saying all of the personnel items, but might there have been one or two, rather than as we look here, there's a $14,000 item for paint supplies, okay, as an example. I thought that we were going to be able to live without that.
Well, that was because we had cut the painter. But what we are saying here is we really don't want to cut the painter, that we do need to take care of our buildings. That's the minimum amount of maintenance that we are funding.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess we're all a little torn between a risk account and not. I mean, we've taken risks in the past and they've come back to bite us big time. So shortchanging the risk account can cost us dearly. We find ourselves in a predicament now because we over-risked last time. Or, pardon me, we under-risked. In other words, we didn't take as much risk as we should have because those costs came home to roost, and we didn't have enough money in our budget to cover it, and hence we found ourselves in the hole. So it's
And we've done a lot to try and save money. Since February, we've been in a freeze. And so, that's February to July 1st, frozen. So, the risks that we're paying for, we're not seeing the full cost because of those freezes and the actions that our business office has taken to, try to stop that bleeding.
well, I think whatever we do, we need to, assuming we're all going to vote in a certain way, eventually that all-day kindergarten will happen in all 5 schools in September, just to repeat that. How we do that, what funded, I don't think the public cares how we fund it, that they, they shouldn't have to really get into that level, but that didn't happen.
And I think you heard the superintendent say we are funding all-day kindergarten. We are advertising for the teachers, and that we are going to have an all-day kindergarten program this year.
All right, one clarification. You had said previously there were 2.5 that you wanted to fund in the hard budget, let's call it, and 3.5, that's a total of 6, but you referred to 7.
It's 4.
All right, okay.
Sorry.
Just want you to know we're paying attention.
Mrs. Fisher?
I just have a question. If we were talking about adding a district-wide art teacher, if we were to still add a teacher to Center Road School, would they still be able to collaborate?
Yes.
They would.
Ms. Zarn?
The district would have lived without that district-wide art teacher had we not been given this opportunity to chat again, right? So I'm not comfortable adding something new and different. I would personally like to not fund that teacher.
Pull your microphone, I'm getting motions from the back of the room.
They can't hear you.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to not fund that teacher and fund the paraprofessional, library assistant, reading, those 3 positions that we took out that are not recommended by the administration to return to the budget. I think because I don't disagree with your argument about adding the art teacher, but to me, that's like a last minute addition and we were gonna do without it this year. I'm more concerned with the things that we were not going to do without and should not have to do without, like the paraprofessional secretary, the paraprofessional library assistant, and the paraprofessional reading for 39, 45, 46,000, something like that. You know what, I'm just gonna put that in the form of a motion to add back to the budget. The paraprofessional secretary, 2.0 FTEs for $27,850.
Are you going to do them one at a time or as a group?
I think it's more appropriate to do it one at a time.
Okay, so I have a motion to add back pending the referendum,
I'm sorry, yes, pending the referendum result.
the $27,850 for the paraprofessional secretary position. Is there a second? Ms. Goldich? And is there any discussion on that motion? Mr. Kemp?
Yeah, I'd just like to go over, assuming there are going to be 3 motions, one in succession after the other here, library assistant and reading 180. Where were you going to, you were talking about, this is 46,645. And instead of that, what was your thinking?
What?
Ms. Arndt, you have the floor.
I expressed my concern about the district-wide art teacher, that addition, the $69,000. I didn't want to make that as my first motion to remove it. I wanted to see how the board felt about adding back paraprofessionals and secretaries to the budget and make up that addition someplace else. Someone else may have a different option. Maybe we take some money out of the risk that we've taken. I didn't want to suggest that at the same time. But I would be looking to make an exchange for that, Mr. Kemp, not just add that back in with no exchange.
Thank you, Ms. Arndt. Ms. Goldich?
It is possible if we reduce the risk level in the health insurance account from $130,000 to $100,000 and reduce the risk level in the contingency account to $15,000, that would give us enough money to reinstate the 3 paraprofessional positions. And that would leave some amount of risk in those accounts.
Mr.
Out
Kemp?
of risk money.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Kemp?
Well, it goes back to the, what's the magic number when it comes to taking risks in contingency accounts? It's always easier to try to fund a person than take a nebulous thing like a contingency number, but, I mean, you can do that. It's a mechanical way of covering a dollar amount that you're looking to achieve in the form of these potentially 3 positions. It's just my thinking that it's hurt us before when we didn't take enough dollars placed enough dollars in our contingency and health accounts and magnet school accounts and special ed accounts when they came back to bite us. And so, we can do that if you want to.
Is there any other discussion about adding back the paraprofessional secretary? Ms. Fisher?
Can I just ask for some clarification on where that secretary would come from at the high school? What office?
The paraprofessional secretary, where that is?
Right. Is it in the front office? Is it in attendance? Where is that position?
Have that, or-
Mr. Boehm had made the decisions. I think one is in the attendance area, if I recall, and I'm not sure where the other one is. He had named them.
Ms. Buell, do you have that information?
One is attendance secretary at the high school, and then a pair at the main office at the middle school.
Thank you. Mr. Kemp?
I would just say, I think it's appropriate that we put in front of a motion or 2 or 3 the qualifier about the budget passing.
Yeah, she did do that. She
Is that
amended
right?
to do that, yes, after I asked. Ms. Goldich did this one.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Buell, through the chair, you said there was one, that the paraprofessional was in the attendance office and one at VCMS. These are both listed under RHS.
You're right.
There's a microphone right by you there. There you go.
It's the main office at Rockville High School, sorry, and the attendance office at Rockville High School.
Okay, thank
The
you.
second line at BCMS is a separate person.
Which is not being recommended to be reinstated. Thank you.
Other discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'm going to call that motion to a vote by a show of hands. All in favor of adding back the per secretary 27,850 pending the referendum. And those opposed? I show 1 opposed, the motion does carry. Ms. Soren?
I'd like to move to add $12,654 to the budget for the paraprofessional library assistant pending results of the budget referendum.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second on that motion? Ms. Fisher? I have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on that motion? This is the paraprofessional library assistant, $12,654. Seeing none, I'm going to call that motion to a vote by a show of hands. All in favor? And that's unanimous. And anyone else wish to have the floor? Mr. Percy?
Do you want to keep going, or?
It's okay, I'll wait.
I'd like to have a discussion about the all-day kindergarten, 189,922. I see what Dr. Conway wants to do, and I don't necessarily disagree with it. Getting it into the local budget makes sense to me. Excuse me. But this year is with all the cuts we've already made, I'd be willing to leave that all to Alliance money, pull that 189 out, so we have that to disperse among these positions and so forth. Don't know how the rest of the board feels about that, but just a thought. And then start the phasing in over the next few budgets.
Mr. Kemp and then Ms. Gorsuch.
Well, I supported Michelle's motions on these two positions. However, I think our priority really has been and will be implementing all-day kindergarten and protecting it. And the best way to protect it is through the budgetary process by putting as much as we can in the hard budget, let's call it, as possible. If some of these other positions were our priority, I would support that. But our priority has been the implementation of all-day kindergarten and, as I said, protecting it. So, in as much as I have nothing against some of these other positions, but looking at the goals we set and the priorities we established, all day is it. And so we've taken these few motions and approved them, but that's as far as I want to go.
Mr. Percy.
All day's happening. It's supposed to happen regardless with the Alliance money. So your argument, we're supposed to get Alliance money that we were going to fund all-day kindergarten with. That's why we pulled it out of our local budget. So I understand the point of putting some into our local budget to start paying for it in future years so it gets into our local budget. I'm just saying, let's put that off a year because we've already had such deep cuts into this budget for next year. All-day kindergarten is going to happen with the Alliance District Fund.
Ms. Gorsuch.
What if we split the difference somehow, that we go through the list to pick out the items that are the highest priorities for us to reinstate? Perhaps reduce the amount for all-day kindergarten to $150,000. That would give us $39,922.56 to play with. Replace that with a higher amount from the Alliance District for this year. But I do agree with the approach to start hardwiring all-day kindergarten in our budget as soon as we can.
Ms. Bush.
I am a strong believer that we do need to fund it as soon as possible because we have a history where we had it in place, the budget did not continue funding it, and we lost it. I would like to see as soon as possible, I would like to see us self-funding it so that it's a strong program and we have no worries. So I would like to see it funded in-house soon. So I would support keeping it the way it's shown here with 2 schools, phasing in 1 more, and then 2 more the next year.
Thank you. I'm going to ask that if we could take a 5-minute recess. I want to check on our board member. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. And sorry for interrupting the discussion. We were talking about the all-day K and which portion of how we wanted to fund it this year, knowing that we have the Alliance District coming, providing the state passes their budget, and that we would be able to use that funding. That was where the discussion left off, and I don't know if anybody has further input to that, or if there's action that someone wishes to make. Ms. Fisher?
I'll make a motion that we add $189,922.56 for all-day kindergarten at Maple Street Northeast School,
Pending the,
pending passage of the.
thank you. And Ms. Bush?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Is there more dialogue on that motion? Seeing none, I'm going to call that motion to a vote by a show of hands. All in favor? 5. Okay, and those opposed? I show 2 opposed. That motion does carry 5-2. Other action. Ms. Fisher?
I'd like to move that we add a teacher to Center Road School, not the art teacher, but a regular classroom teacher for $69,000.
I have a motion to add the classroom teacher for Center Road School. Is there a second? Ms. Bush?
Second.
A motion and a second. Is there discussion on that motion? Mr. Percy?
That's not on this list.
I realize that.
I'm just looking for clarification, I wasn't.
There was a teacher removed from 3-4 last meeting, but it wasn't an art teacher. It was a teacher from that 3-4 grade level. And they were trying to, instead of bringing back that position, they were going to use the art position so that they could increase their collaborative time. That was why Ms. Podlich gave up the teacher. She was not asking for the teacher to be reinstated. Ms. Fisher and then Ms. Fisher.
My logic behind that is I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the art teacher is being put in for collaboration, which I believe could be covered under the Alliance District funds.
Correct. Any other discussion? Ms. Bush?
That actually was my thinking, that that is something that would increase collaboration, so that could be put in, the art teacher could be put in specifically for the Alliance grant, because it's used for a specific purpose to increase achievement. So I would agree with that.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on that motion? Mr. Kevin?
Just curious, is there some where that you're looking to reduce in order to accommodate those dollar additions to the total?
The art teacher I would hope would come out of the Alliance District grant, so we don't need to reduce in other places.
Okay, so really you're going to make 2 motions, one to do this and one to remove the art. Is that it?
Well, the art's not in there yet.
We haven't added the art yet. The only things that we've added so far are Mr. Kevin.
All right. In other words, what's on the list here,
It's just a suggestion.
pardon? You just won't take action on it, is that right?
Correct.
I see.
Other discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call that motion to a vote by a show of hands as is adding back the grade 3-4 teacher at Center Road School. All in favor? And those opposed? I show 1 opposed. That motion carries 7-1. Other discussion or motions? Ms. Fisher?
I'd like to move that we add $61,693 for a painter, as well as $14,072 for paint supplies.
I have a motion pending.
Pending, sorry.
Thank you. I have a motion, and Ms. Bush?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to add back the painter and the paint supplies. Is there discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'm going to call that motion to a vote by show of hands. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Ms. Bush?
I'd like to make a motion to add the alternative learning program teacher, the secretary, for 69,000, the secretary, the 1.0 10-month FTE for $29,968. The secretaries, the 2 FTEs, 12 to 10 months for $10,898. And the secretary 1.0 should be FTE for $13,901.
Mr. Butcher?
I second it, sir.
I have a motion and a second to add back that block. Is there discussion on those positions, the alternative learning secretaries and secretary position? Ms. Soren?
I'd like to ask if there's any intention to address the secretary positions that were cut at VCMS. My only worry is if we're adding all of those. I'd be looking to do the same at VCMS if there's room for compromise. On those secretaries, I just hate to eliminate the opportunity to discuss the VCMS secretaries as well.
And I'd ask Dr. Conway if there was any discussion that may be pertinent that you could share regarding, any rationale why they may not have gone after that direction. Is there anything that?
No, there was just no discussion. Mr. Kane was in the room and did not add anything to the discussion regarding those secretaries, so I can't say.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure there wasn't any rationale for why
there was none. It was not discussed.
Thank you. Board members, I don't know if there's any dialogue or discussion that you wish to have regarding that. This is, again, the motion is for the secretaries and the alternative learning at Rockville High School currently. Mr. Percy.
I'm just checking out. So I'm looking at the secretaries at BCMS. 1, 2, 3, 4. I see 3 in the general principal office, 1 in the guidance office. Do you know where either of those are coming out of?
I do. In the main office, the secretary, one of the 2 secretaries in the main office, there's actually 2 in the main office, 1 in the guidance and 1 with the assistant principals. If you recall, their offices are segregated throughout the suite there. And the paraprofessional would be the paraprofessional in the main office as well. So that would leave 1 secretary in the main office.
Ms. Hart.
I move to divide the question, please.
I have a motion to divide in a second. I don't believe it is, but I will call that motion to a vote to divide by a show of hands. All in favor? And those opposed? I show 1 carry. Mr. Butcher, are you abstaining? Are you opposed?
Opposed.
You're opposed. 2 opposed. And so that motion does carry to divide, so we're going to take these individually. So we'll start with the alternative learning program, 69,000. Is there discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'm going to call that to a vote by a show of hands on the alternatively learning. All in favor? And those opposed? I show 1 opposed. That motion does pass. The next item on the list is the secretary, the 1.0 10-month, 29,968. Discussion. Mr. Percy.
If we do not reinstate that one at RHS, we can reinstate one of the secretaries at VCMS because it's the same dollar amount. I'm thinking, looking at this, how the secretaries are split, I don't think it's fair to not let VCMS have some of their secretaries back, in my opinion.
Other discussion. Ms. Goldich.
Through the chair, Dr. Conway, could you say again how many secretaries at VCMS will be left if we lose these 2 positions?
There are 4 secretaries. There will be 3 secretaries, 1 in guidance, 1 with the 2 assistant principals, and 1 with the principal.
Are the secretaries with the assistant principals in the same physical location as the secretary with?
It's a suite of offices, and so you can't see one place from the other.
So that would, in essence, if someone is out sick or on vacation, that would leave those positions
Correct.
unstaffed.
Correct.
And if they can't see from one position to another, that feels like a security risk to me.
That's the way the offices are set up. They're all in the same suite off the main corridor, but that's the way they're all set up.
I would assume they'd have to make some accommodation if the
I'm sure they have
secretary by the
a system
front
in
entry
mind.
was the one who was
I'm sure they have a system they follow.
Other discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call that motion to a vote by a show of hands. All in favor of adding back the secretary 1.0 10 month at RHS? And those opposed? And that passes 4-3. Did you get the? Yes. Next on the list, the Secretary 2.0 FTE from 12 to 10 months, bringing them back to 12 months. That's 10,898. Discussion on that. Seeing none, I'm going to call that to a vote by a show of hands. All in favor? And those opposed? I show 2 opposed. That motion does carry 5-2. And then the last one in the block, Secretary 1.0 for 13,901. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, I'm going to call that to a vote by a show of hands. All in favor? And those opposed? I show that 3 opposed, so that it passed 4-3. And that takes care of that block. Those are all. Ms. Cern.
I'd like to move to add to the budget at VCMS, a secretary for $29,968 and a paraprofessional secretary for $11,935.56 pending referendum result.
I have a motion. Do I have a second on that motion? Mr. Percy.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on that motion? Ms. Bush.
Where are we gonna give and take? Where are we gonna give and take for the money that the 2 secretaries? Anybody have an idea?
Mr. Percy.
I don't know why it's a give and take right now. We're adding money back in. We have recommendations in one column. We don't have to take all these recommendations. All those recommendations are not put in, they're just recommendations. So if we add, as long as at the end of the day we get to $1 million, that's where we're heading. We don't have to take every recommendation the administration has put out there.
I do understand that, but.
I'll recognize Mr. Bush.
Sorry. I do understand that through you, Mr. Chair. But we've already discussed the idea of lowering our risk, and I'd like to make sure that that happens, but, so we kind of have to have an idea where we're going.
Thank you. And we can ask Mr. Picaro after we get the next number where we stand, as I believe he's been keeping tally. Other discussion on that motion to add back the 2 secretarial positions at VCMS. Mr. Percy.
That office is going to be understaffed. I'm in that office once in a while because my family goes to VCMS, and it's not fair to those secretaries that are going to remain. There's a lot of work, they do a lot of stuff, and I think they're important.
Other discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call that motion to a vote by a show of hands. All in favor? And those opposed? And that motion does pass 4-3.
Point of order. Does the chair choose to vote?
Yes, you do have a point of order there. That is correct. I could vote and make that a tie and cause that motion to fail. And at this point, I did not take action. So that motion has passed. Mr. Percy,
I'd like to make a motion to restore the $143,000 to the textbook adoptions pending referendum passage.
Ms. Fisher.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second on the, where's the number for that? There is 143,000 for the textbook adoption. And I have a second discussion. Mr. Boutar.
I seconded.
That was seconded.
Oh.
Mr. Percy made the motion, Ms. Fisher seconded the motion.
I didn't see that thing, sorry about that.
Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, I'm going to call that motion to a vote by a show of hands. All in favor? And that's unanimous. If I could ask Mr. Picaro for where we stand at this moment?
So you, Mr. Peter, come in, Peter.
Right.
Nope, nope.
Really? Give me this one. You're old, how's that sound?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the board has made $683,862.12 in adjustments to the budget. To reach $1 million, we need to go another $316,137.88.
There we go. That's our number, our target number. Is there additional discussion? Ms. Fisher.
I'd like to move that we add $125,000 back in for the special education tuition non-public.
I have a motion on the $125,000 for the special education non-public. Ms. Bush?
Second.
A motion and a second on the $125,000. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, call to a vote by show of hands. All in favor? That's unanimous. Ms. Fisher.
I move that we add $20,000 back for central supply.
I have a motion on the central supply, $20,000. Is there a second? Ms. Bush.
Second.
Is there discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'm going to call that to a vote by show of hands. All in favor? That's unanimous. Other discussion or motions? Probably around 160.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, $171,137.88 to go.
Thank you. Mr. Percy.
Last meeting, we had a discussion on those last two risk accounts, the alternative learning school and the projected vacancy rate. I know we made up, granted we were in a hiring freeze, a good chunk of money from the current fiscal year. So I'm willing to leave that out because I think the number was $230,000 in our risk mitigation plan. If Mr. Carr could verify that.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, we need an additional revenue. Thank you, Mr. President.
The mitigation plan, the first section, I had it somewhere around here, was just the employees that we've saved.
Because of not filling positions.
Not filling
and
positions.
vacancies.
There was more to it than just filling vacancies, through you, Mr. Chairman. Many of those were related to workers' compensation, FMLA leave. So we may or may not experience it. That's the risk factor that's involved.
But what it was $230,000, but it's that same, the projected vacancy rates, that's the same kind of thing. I know it's not all just not filling positions, I understand that, but you're going to have vacancies across the district anyway. Thank you.
Other discussion? No, I didn't hear any motion there. Okay, thank you. Just trying to make sure I didn't miss some. Ms. Sun.
I'm going to apologize if I missed the discussion about transportation relative to instituting all-day kindergarten at Northview School and Maple Street School.
Yeah, there was no discussion on that
There
at
was
this
not.
point, no.
Can I ask if we'll incur some additional transportation expenses then that we haven't accounted for?
No, I don't believe we would incur expenses because we are going to implement it across the district. It's just we're going to use some of the alliance and some of the town money to do that. So we shouldn't incur
So there won't
expenses.
be any difference in the transportation?
Yeah, we get that savings.
Okay.
Mrs. Fisher.
I'm just going to make a motion for discussion that we add the district-wide art teacher for $69,000.
A motion to add the district-wide art teacher for $69,000. Is there a second? Mrs. Bush is seconding that?
Second.
Okay, motion and second. And now I'll open up for discussion on adding the position for the art teacher. And this was, the intent is to be able to establish collaboration time for the grades.
I guess I'm just not positive that the Alliance District
Just gonna recognize you.
will cover that cost for collaboration because it's an art teacher. I don't know, I'm just a little skeptical that that will come under the Alliance District funding. So that's why I put it out there.
Other discussion or question? Mr. Kemp?
I'm not opposed to it, although it was the superintendent's plan to make that happen using alliance money. What I am concerned about is there are 4 funds right now where we have not made a formal adoption back into the budget that are risk factors, and before we spend them all away, I think we need to pay attention to the health insurance where there's 130,000 there, 25 in contingency, 49 and 49 in the 2 risk accounts. That's 230. There's $250,000 that we just cannot take down to zero or anywhere close to that. I mean, these are being put back into the budget for a reason, and I think we would feel good if we put some positions in place, but then we would find ourselves having to take positions away next year when we don't have the money to cover these kinds of accounts, like we had happened this year in a big way. It's not good. We need to address that. I mean,
I'm going to recognize Ms. Bush.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask Dr. Conway. If, from what you understand of the Alliance District grant, would that be something that would be able to be funded through the grant, the art teacher, for collaboration purposes?
I would believe so. I couldn't tell you 100%. Of course, I don't know until the grant is approved, but teacher collaboration time is one of the, or collaborating adults is one of the 3 goals of the commissioner. So it certainly fits right in, and that's the way we need to do it. The 5 principals have been working for a long time on figuring out a schedule that they could use to ensure that all teachers had collaboration time every day, the same planning time every day, so they could collaborate. So I believe so.
Thank you.
I'll withdraw my motion.
So that motion is withdrawn. Ms. Sarn.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, could Mr. Picaro tell us the dollar amount left, please?
Mr. Picaro?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, $171,137.88.
Ms. Goldich.
I'd like to make a motion to restore in the health insurance account $100,000, and in the contingency account, I can't count that quickly. $15,000 pending referendum approval.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Mr. Kemp.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Goldich and a second by Mr. Kemp. Is there discussion on that motion? And that's 100,000 under the health insurance, and that's 15,000 under the contingency. And seeing no hands for discussion, I'm going to call that motion to a vote by a show of hands. All in favor? And that's unanimous.
It was 15 for contingency.
It was 15 for contingency and 100 for, yeah. So that's, Mr. Carl, you have the floor.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, remaining to go is $56,137.88.
Ms. Arn.
I'd like to move to restore $28,019 to the alternative learning school and $28,019 to the projected vacancy rate pending referendum result. I'm sorry.
44 cents.
Oh, I thought the 44 cents. Pending the referendum result.
Which two accounts?
I'm sorry, the risk account, the two risk accounts.
How much was
28,019
each?
to each account. Check and make sure.
That's not right.
So you're basically splitting the difference of what we have left.
56 to 96.
So you're going to take, you want to take the 56,137 and split it equally amongst those two risk accounts. Is that your?
Right.
Okay, that motion, is there a second? Mrs. Bush?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to split the remaining 56,137 between the alternative learning and the projected vacancy. And I have a second. Is there discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call that motion to a vote by a show of hands. All in favor? And that's unanimous.
Who seconded that?
I did.
Yes, Mrs. Bush, I'm sorry. Ms. Bush. And that puts us at $1 million at this point. Mr. Percy.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second on that motion? And there's a bunch of them. That's a non-debatable motion. So I'm going to recognize Mr. Butar as the seconder. And all in favor? And we are adjourned.